Welcome to Lighthouse Leadership. This is going to be an extension of the guide ebook, but it also can serve as standalone course. You don't by any means have to read the guide, but some of the lessons that we'll teach in this course will be extended application from what we touched on in the book, but most of the material will be brand new. So feel free to check out the guide. It might serve you a little bit better to get some of the background that we'll go into further detail in this course on. And then also make sure you check out the bonus material. When you buy this course, you're going to get a ton of extra stuff. We have practice plan sheets, we have sample weekly plans, and we have 5 other presentations that go along with this one. So by no means this is the only presentation. We have a whole lot more to help serve your players become better human beings, better athletes, and better players. So we'll get started. So why Lighthouse? What does it represent? So if you're not familiar, lighthouses are guides. We can't go in the stormy seas of life and do things for our athletes. So obviously this is a metaphor. We can be a light, we can be a guide on their journey, but we can't do things for them. So that's why we chose the term lighthouse. In this course, you're going to learn the pillars we teach from, the systems and frameworks that we use, and there'll be some mini lessons and application at the end of each presentation so you can put kind of the science into application and actually take action towards making your players better in every aspect that we're going to learn about. So the 3 pillars in our program: develop the human being first and foremost, develop the athlete, and develop the hockey player. And we say in that order no matter what. Elite teams and businesses develop more than just the worker if you're in a business, and more than just the player if you're in a team. It's our moral obligation really as coaches to do more than just teach the game. When you look at and study successful teams, successful businesses, whether it's the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Chicago Steel in hockey, whether it's King Kong, who's an up-and-coming digital marketing agency and one of the fastest growing companies in Australia, Southwest Airlines, Student Made, the Seattle Seahawks. Each and every one of them are doing more than just the job at hand. And if they're a business, they're doing more than just trying to make money. And if they're a football team, they're doing more than just trying to win games. It's our obligation to upskill the people in our charge to make them better human beings, more equipped for this ever-changing world that we're living in, and provide a holistic environment to develop them as athletes in the strength and conditioning, in the nutrition, and then obviously to develop the hockey player, which is your traditional tactical skill development, and everything that you're going to actually get on the ice at the rink. So the first thing we want to talk about, and that I frame up for my athletes, is this idea that there's no sacrifice. And we talked about it in the guide, wrote a little blurb on it there. But basically how we frame it up to our guys is, the Steph Currys of the world, the Michael Jordans of the past. They're not sacrificing. They're not missing out on hanging out with their friends, maybe going to a party on Friday. They're not sacrificing. The term coaches use far too often is that you have to sacrifice for this. You don't have to sacrifice to be elite. Like, these competitors want it so bad, and they love their sport, and they love becoming a craftsman of their body, mind, and reaching their potential, that is not seen as a sacrifice. So the questions that we ask our athletes to kind of direct their focus on this is, are you investing time, or is your time being stolen? And then where are you directing your time and attention? If you spend 2 hours at the rink for practice and a workout, where is your time and attention the other 22 hours? Are you maximizing and getting as much rest as you need to be effective the next day? Are you eating the right foods? Are you doing some sort of recovery? Like, it's becoming an every minute of the day thing when you get higher and higher up the ladder. So what are you doing to separate yourself, to be different, to work a little bit harder or a little bit smarter, and create a competitive advantage over all the players on your team, all the players in your league, all the players at levels above you, to become better? But if it's truly out of love, there is no sacrifice. Okay, so ERO is the first framework that we teach from. ERO is event plus response equals outcome. And there's a mindset, which we'll talk about in this slide, and there's a skill set, which we'll talk about in the next slide. So just to frame it up for you, the mindset, there's 3 things. You don't control events that happen to you. You don't control outcomes. You only control your response. And this is how all of life works. Life is constantly, there's an event, there's a circumstance or situation, that's the E. And then you have an outcome in mind. You want to respond skillfully and not on impulse so you can get the right outcome. And then it's all about responding appropriately to get the outcome that you want. So life is constantly event, response, outcome. Your job is now to just get good at it. Okay, so the skill set. If you're chasing an outcome with intent, you want to work backwards. There's a low value way to work ERO, and that's just doing it from left to right. So if you're responding to events constantly and you're just reacting to things that are happening to you, you're not chasing, you're not being proactive. And the other mistake is to only use it in times of adversity. Some people frame this up to how they want to respond to adversity. This should be, again, how life works. This should be every minute of every day this is going on, and if you can keep that in mind, you can start to develop your speed at being better at this. So we like to start with the O first. What outcome do you want? What are you chasing? What are you trying to get to? What is that going to require? And then to look at what situation you're dealing with. That's the event. And then last is, what response do I need to get the outcome that I want? So we want to look at the O first, because if we look at the E first and we're just reacting, instead of being proactive to the outcomes that we want, that's not going to get us there as fast as we'd like. And getting good at this is a competitive advantage. The better and faster you do ERO, the more advantage you're going to have over the guy next to you. And if your team does this well, the better you're going to match up as a team against any team that you're going to face. Like we said, ERO is about processing faster than your opponent, or processing in a competition with yourself. So you're trying to be better than you were yesterday. this gets highlighted as you move up levels. The game only gets faster. And TV commentators will say, the game slows down for the elite competitors. But the game doesn't slow down. Like, as you move from the East Coast League to the American League, and the American League to the NHL, the game doesn't go slower, the game goes faster. So what commentators really mean when they're like, the game slows down for him, you're processing, or that player's processing more, they're processing faster, and they're processing with more skill in less time. It's about how quickly they can access the highest level response. And the fact that they can access that response faster is what really separates them. But the game's moving faster, and they're thinking faster, the game's not slowing down. And this can be seen in Navy pilot training. Navy pilots are put in simulators to see when they're going to become OBE, which stands for Overcome by Events. So how it works is they start with just the pilot in a simulator flying through the desert in clear conditions. And then they add a friendly pilot that flies next to them in the same clear conditions. And then they add rain. And then they add one enemy fighter in the area. And then the environment changes to a mountain environment. And then there's 2 friendlies. And 3 enemies. Then 4 enemies. Then 5 enemies. And they see at what level the pilot's skill and speed of processing are. And as soon as he fails, whether it's 1 friendly or whether it's with 5 enemy fighters in the area, that's where he becomes overcome by events. And that's they start practicing in the future from that level. So wherever he's overcome by events, they don't regress from there. They start training right on the edge of where he failed. And that continues in the future until he gets better and processes faster and faster and faster. And eventually he becomes overcome by events later on with 7, 8, 10 enemies in the area. And when that pilot's increasing their skill and lasting longer in the simulator, they're improving their OODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, and act. So they're observing what's going on, they're taking in the information, they're orienting to that information, and quickly processing what they need to do. Then they're going to make a decision on the few choices that they have in their head, and then they're going to act on that choice. And again, with this training, they're increasing the speed at which that loop happens in their head, which over time makes them better. And this is seen in athletics too. That's what we're doing when we're playing small area games or keep away games or anything of that sort that has both perception and action. Your players are observing what's going on around them. They're orienting to their potential options, where the enemies are. They're making a decision, and then they're acting on that decision. So there's perception and action in good hockey training, just like there is in military training. So the next layer of our human development is this idea of 20 square feet, which is a metaphor for ownership in the culture. Each player controls their attitude and actions in the culture as part of a bigger organization. They have 100% control of it inside of their 20 square feet, and then outside of their immediate area of influence, they attempt to influence their teammates in a positive direction and hold them accountable when they are not acceptable in their 20 square feet. We don't hire talented jerks. Other teams, as you can read below, say it a little bit more harshly, but Netflix broadcasts this to all of its potential prospects that are trying to get a job in their organization. They're not going to take someone, even if they're the most talented in whatever field they're trying to hire for. They're not going to take the best accountant. They're not going to take the most talented marketer if they don't fit in with the culture, if they're not a team player, and like they say, if they're a jerk. So now more than ever, especially if you want to be an elite player, part of an elite team, if you want to be a part of an elite business and be a worker for them, you have to be a team player. You have to bring positive energy. You have to solve problems, and you can't just complain. So again, in these organizations and these elite teams, developing the human being is the most important thing that they do. It's the most important thing that they want to do. And if you have these skills already or a good base coming in, you're going to separate yourself and accelerate on those teams and in those companies faster than everyone else. So the obvious question when you get online courses, when you read an article, and things like that is, how do I apply this? How do I apply this? How do we do this in real life? So below what you're seeing is a screenshot of our weekly schedule with a junior hockey team. Obviously, as a youth coach, you'll probably have a lot less time at the rink than we have the luxury to have, so you'll have to adjust and pick your spots where you want to layer in some behavior skill training or mental skill training after practice or before practice. You might have to shorten up your meetings if you have younger players to keep their attention. But this is what we do. So as you can see, we're trying to develop the human being as much as possible, and it almost happens every day. On Monday, we're doing human development meetings. On Tuesday, we're talking about a leadership email that gets sent out that they read or a video that they watch, and then we'll talk about how that applies and how we can implement that to be better people. On Wednesdays, we're looking at some sports psychology, some mental skills training to make us better, either in the game, deal with mistakes, in between periods, dealing with adversity, or how to better prepare a routine before a game to make us more successful on the ice. Thursday is typically the only day that we don't talk about it. Day before a game, we're focused on finalizing our pre-scout and focusing on what we have to do on the weekend to be most successful. But early in the week, we are hammering the human development piece for our players, both before and after practice. The best way to teach it is to get players involved. Don't just lecture at them. As coaches, we can have the patience to take notes and sit through online courses and YouTube presentations and take notes, but these players lose interest quickly if you don't engage and involve them. So, like I said in the last slide, you can send out a YouTube clip of a leader talking about something that he does with his team or what he's looking for in a prospective player. And you can send that video out the night before via email, have your guys watch it, or send out an article, have them read it, and then the next day at your meeting, it's 100% interactive. You don't have to watch the video together. You don't have to wait for them to read the article. And you can start having a discussion on how they can apply this, how they can get better, and how they can use the information that you sent out the night before. Another way to do it is to do a team book club. I know one of the years I was coaching my junior team, we read the book Legacy together, which goes into detail about the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team culture. Every couple days we would have them get through a chapter, and then we would have a team meeting about what the chapter is about, and how we can best apply it to make ourselves better, make our team better, and learn and grow with and from each other. So one example from the book, the guide, let's say you want to teach proactive pauses that day in a meeting before practice, which is essentially just contingency planning for an event that's probably going to happen in a game. So if there's a penalty called by a ref, we can pre-plan and pre-agree how we want our players to respond to that penalty call. And those sort of events, penalties and missed calls, are going to happen in every single game. In the other example, the bus gets late to the rink. That's maybe going to happen once a year, but you can, again, pre-plan a response for that, so you're not surprised by it. You have a plan, you know what to do, and your players can stay focused on the task at hand instead of worrying and thinking about how late they are and how they're unprepared and how they're not going to play well. And those thoughts start piling up, and they're going to play worse because of that. So get your players involved, get a group discussion going, get them to pre-agree as a team how they want to act when the ref misses a call. Do they all want to start screaming and yelling? Or do they want to say, hey guys, next play, like stay present? When there's a penalty called, does the player that gets the penalty throw his arms up and start yelling at the ref? Or does he just skate as fast as he can to the penalty box, open the door, sit down, and not say anything? And if your players can pre-plan how they want to do that, they're more likely going to self-police each other, and hold each other accountable when what they don't pre-agree on ends up happening. Next week at practice, maybe you want to have an accountability theme, and you want to teach that to your players. The best way we think to do this, and a mantra we have that we empower our players with, is if you see something, say something. And especially this generation of kids is a little bit more uncomfortable with person-to-person interaction, and especially person-to-person conflict. So they need to get reps at it in a safe environment where they can fail. So you can set up a role-playing scenario, have them partner off, and you tell them that they're allowed to screw up and make mistakes and not say things the right way and get better at it next time. A lot of kids don't want to hold teammates accountable because they've never done it before and they don't know how. So practice it. And you can script a line for them to start it off, so players know that when these words are coming, that there's going to be some accountability. So you can tell your players, start your sentence off with, I saw blank behavior, and you know that's just not how we do things here. You'll get it next time. Or another script you can run with is what they call FBI, feeling, behavior, impact. So you could say something like, I felt disappointed when you were 20 minutes late to practice. Help me understand your situation so it doesn't hurt the team in the future. So feeling disappointed is obviously the feeling. The behavior is you were 20 minutes late to practice. And then helping them discover that they actually are impacting more than just themselves and they're actually hurting the team, with the last part of it is the impact that it has both on them and on the team. So those are two ways that you can immediately apply teaching your players to hold each other accountable, to offer feedback to each other, which is something that, for the most part across the board, especially at the youth level, players are going to be uncomfortable with. so they need to get reps at it. Another hands-on applied learning, you can do this in conjunction with that player profile sheet even. Find out early on what their why is. So you can ask them to go home, type out an email to you, make a Google form, write it on a sheet of notebook paper, ask them to write down what motivates them to come to the rink every day, why they're doing what they're doing, why they love hockey, and what they hope to get out of their experience. If you've created enough vulnerability in your environment, as a coach, you can even have players share aloud at a future team meeting to the whole team what their why is, or they can just submit it to you so you know what drives them and you know how to be a better coach for each and every individual player. The next thing you can do, and probably the thing that I'm biggest on in terms of player development, and probably the biggest thing that players aren't doing enough of, is reflection. You have to get your players to start a reflection practice. We live right now in a hurricane of noise, and we go from one thing to the next thing, from our phone to the TV to emptying the dishwasher, back to our phone, in the car, eat something on the run, to practice, on our phone, like constantly. We're just one thing to the next, one thing to the next, and we're not reflecting on what we're doing, the intent behind what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it. We're in this hurricane of noise, and oftentimes we're just on autopilot. It's human nature. We have to develop thinkers to be better in the classroom, better hockey players, and it will be extremely beneficial to their development in all areas of their life to reflect and review. One way we can do this is an after-action review. We can check in with players, or they can check in with themselves at the end of the week. We can have end of the month check-ins, and then something called the daily audit. And we'll go over all three of those things. So after action reviews, a lot of coaches will do this to prompt their players to start thinking. And eventually, hopefully, they can start doing these things on their own. But if you do it after a game, you sit down with your team and you either have them write down for them individually or for the team what went well, what didn't go well, and if it didn't go well, what steps can we take to be better in the future? So that's the three questions of an after action review. End of the week check-in can be the same thing. It's more internally with yourself. What did I do this week? How did I do it? Could I have done anything differently? Did I get distracted? You can ask questions that cause you to look inside as to how effective you're being in terms of your development on the ice, at practice, off the ice, and in everyday life. And then end of the month, same thing, just the end of the month. And then a daily audit. We have our players do this right away when they get to us to see where they are as they're adjusting to junior hockey. So their schedule's been changed. We let them kind of settle in for a week or two, and then we ask them to write down everything that they do for 3 days in a row. So a Monday through a Wednesday, when they get up, what they eat, when they eat, if they're watching TV, if they're at the gym, if they're sitting around, if they're hanging out with their friends, anything that they do in the day and the time that they do it goes on that sheet. And we see where their time and energy are focused on, and if we can make any small changes to increase the impact and create more development chances for them in a day. Another thing you can do with your team, have your players write you a text response to a question that you prompt them with before practice, after practice, later that night. If you have the guide, there's a ton of introspective questions for your players. You can just pick one a day, one a week, send it out to them, give them a couple days to respond, and have them send that to you. And then you're going to get a feel for how they think about certain things, what they're doing, what they're trying to do, what they're struggling with, and you're going to be more empowered as a coach to, again, have better understanding of where your players currently are at, where you can meet them, where you can guide them, where you can push them, where you might need to pull back. It's just going to create a lot more understanding on your end about how you can help each and every player. Or if you want to constrain them for time, pose the question at the beginning of a team meeting, give them 5 minutes or less to think about it, and then have a team discussion and just start calling on people for their thoughts. This will make them think on their feet, form an opinion, and defend it, which they're going to have to do all the time in life, so it's great practice. Another team building idea you could do is there's a game called 200 Years Ago. You can split the players into small groups, give them an item from today that wasn't around 200 years ago, have them explain it like it was 200 years ago. So for example, if you give the group a cell phone, how would you explain that to people 200 years ago? They don't know what the word device means, so you'll have to communicate what a device is. You won't be allowed to use the word device, so you'll have to think of ways to get around it. They won't know what the internet in your pocket means. So you have to get creative. It can be kind of fun to challenge your players to become better communicators and really bring clarity to what they're saying and how they're saying it to get their message across. Thanks for watching the webinar, Lighthouse Leadership. At this time, feel free to explore the bonus features. We have a player profile sheet, which we talked about, a glossary example where you can get every player on your team to speak the same language. We have a practice plan sheet that you can feel free to use. We have a morphocycle sample from the previous slide, which you can edit and design your team's weeks. And we have the peer grading sheet, where players can evaluate their peers on the values, beliefs, and behaviors that you guys decide to implement in your culture together. Thanks again.